الصالحين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحابته أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. سبحانك لا فهم لنا إلا ما فهمتنا إنك أنت الجواد الكريم رب زدني علما. So continuing with the chapter, or the section rather you could say, of the blameworthiness of the love of position and standing and rank, in the eyes of the people and in their hearts. And how to deal with this particular type of sickness and what is its treatment. So previously we talked a little bit about Jah, and that Jah is, love of standing. Everybody loves to be liked. And just like wealth. So wealth and standing, in and of themselves, they are not blameworthy, in and of themselves, but it's how they are dealt with, or their position, or the reason, or the intentions behind them. And just as wealth, it's the fact of the matter is that we require a certain amount of wealth for our physical existence. So seeking that amount of wealth for our physical existence and well-being, spending on our families and on others, then actually, as Shafi'i radiallahu anhu says, what a wonderful thing is a salih mal, good wealth in the hand of a good person, because he's going to use it for good things. He'll spend on himself, in justice and equity and in others. And he'll use it for good purposes. Now, if his heart is diseased and he has love of the wealth itself, or love of what it can bring him in terms of fulfilling his desires and passions, which are outside the scope of Sharia, then it becomes a disaster. So similarly, position. Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam used his position, and in fact he described the fact that he was capable of looking after the affairs of the treasury, and so he became, you could say, sort of the minister of the treasuries. And actually he presented himself. He said, I can look after this very competently. Why? Because he realized that if he were to take control of that, then it would be good for everyone. And if he didn't, it could be very disastrous for everyone. Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, he refused to accept the chief justiceship, because he realized that they were trying to use him. This is usually what happens. They put their men in their positions of authority, and then they use them to continue their control over the public. So he wasn't about to be used for that, and so he refused. And his refusal for that got him imprisoned and lashed and beaten, and actually he died in prison as a result of that, to refuse to accept the chief justiceship. Probably his most prolific student, Imam Abu Yusuf, he accepted the chief justiceship. So his teacher, is ready to give his life not to take it, and then why? Because in his situation, it was a different Khalifa, and the situation changed, and so he felt that it was necessary. And in fact, in the case where the rights of the people are going to be squandered unless a particular individual takes that responsibility, he must do so. Otherwise, so here Jah, and of course, taking that position, it will have, create a great standing and dignity and position in the hearts of the people, and one would have to have that position in the hearts of the people to get that position. So if that's used for that proper position or for that proper intention, then that's fine. Of course, that's a slippery stone. It's easier said than done, and many times shaitan, it's a good thing if you do this or get that mal or get that position, But actually it's nafs which is motivating us to move in that. So it's a very delicate situation which it requires quite a sharp insight to be able to decipher that fine line. So here in this particular chapter or this particular section, so the author mentions that the standing and the position of people and wealth, these are the two foundations of dunya, the worldly. And he says something very novel. Man and mal, yani milk al-a'yan, meaning of mal, wealth, is that you have ownership of tangibles. And the meaning of man and in milk al-qulub, the meaning of position and standing is that you have control over the hearts. And so again, if control over the hearts is for your own ego and for your own objectives, then this is very dangerous. But of course, if it is for some proper objective, as we've mentioned, that's another story. Allahu Akbar. And so the reality of this or the reality of this position and standing, as it's called, it actually comes from wajh, because when you have it comes from the wajh, which is when people are impressed by you or consider you to be, so their faces are turning towards you. So it takes its name from that. So this is basically, even though it comes from that, but actually it deals with the hearts. So to have this standing basically means that you have this particular positioning in the hearts of people. And they consider that there's a particular attribute that you have that causes them to feel that you are something special, or that it gives you some particular status. And he says also that this love to, or this desire to have standing, in the eyes and hearts of people, is something that is human nature. And in fact, it's even more profound and more, sort of magnanimous than, and its impact is even greater than the love of wealth. Because wealth, it is connected to some particular, we want something. Either we want the wealth itself or we want something which the wealth gets. Whereas the love of position and standing, that is, as we've said, that is taking control of people's hearts, and manipulation, huge manipulation can take place as a result of that. So it is much more profound, as it were. And so, as we alluded to earlier, that the desire for standing and dignity and position in the hearts of the people, it's from among that is what is praiseworthy and what is blameworthy. So as we also mentioned, for wealth to take care of his necessities and to spend on others, it's going to be praiseworthy. To fulfill his desires and his shahwa, it's going to be blameworthy. So similarly is the case of wajh, or this position or standing, with the people. Allahu Akbar. So now, since generally having a desire for the positioning in the people, this is in many cases, if not most cases, it tends to cause people to do things for that sake. And of course, doing things for the sake of people and not for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is, if not bordering on, actually becoming the reality of hypocrisy. And that could be even in our ibadat, making our salat looking very khashia, very khadiya, very sincere, and so that people would love us by observing our salat or other qualities which are, and this is of course, if not bordering on, if not nifaq in its essence, it's getting very close to it. And therefore Nabi Sallallahu calls it ash-shirk al-khafi, it's a kind of polytheism which is sort of undetected. It goes under the radar. We may not even be conscious of what's going on. So this is also a trick which Shaitan is very active in trying to get people to do. So what do? We need to counteract that. And in counteracting that, what we need to do is we need to look at, number one, there's knowledge that we're going to have to have, and there's realities that we're going to have to ponder over and think about, and then there's actions that we're going to have to do. So number one, it's just like ikhlas. Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala, he says a very practical method of taking care of the situation. So why would we do things for the sake of others? I mean, when we do something, we want something from that. So if we do things for the sake of the creation, so what can the creation do for us in the end of the day? The creation is, after all, creation. They cannot help us, they cannot hurt us in reality. So if we're doing things for the people, it's not going to ultimately be of any use, because the people can neither help us nor harm us without the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also, whatever the people may do or whatever they may feel, whatever they have, it's really not going to help us intrinsically at all. And even if there is some sort of manifestation of some sort of benefit, it's going to end at death. And then after death, what's going to happen? There's going to be accountability, there's going to be, hisab and kitab. It's going to be very disastrous. So one has to think, as we say, tafakkur. However, we do things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves us, then Jibreel alayhi salam loves us, all the malaika love us, and as a fringe benefit, also, you'll get the love of the creation anyway, as a fringe benefit, even though that's not intended. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you, then He has the power to bring you all good and save you from all harm. And creation has no ability to do any of that. And so, Allahu Akbar. And so he mentions here a very novel thing. He says, if we find that people are, praising us, then we have to look at this in one of two ways. Number one, if people are praising us, or they feel that we're, that we are something, that we have standing in their hearts, why? So either it's because of some good thing, or it's something that really doesn't deserve being praised about. For example, if somebody is praising someone else or has standing due to their righteousness or due to their religiousness, then one would think, if people are praising me or they are holding me in standing as a result of that, then after all, that's the tawfiq. This is not my intrinsic quality. It is the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, number one. Number two, people may be holding me in high standing in this regard, but the fact of the matter is, I don't know what's going to be the ultimate outcome. As Nabi alayhi sallam mentions, that someone will live a life of piety, to the extent that between them and the paradise itself is only a hand's width, and then their destiny overtakes them. They end up, reverting back to evil and ending their life in evil, and they end up with an evil consequence in the fire of Jahannam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us all from that. On the other hand, as we've mentioned many times previously, we should never judge it. We don't know what the ultimate end will be. Someone is living a life, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam in the very same hadith mentions, someone is living a life of total sin and transgression. And between him and entering into the fire is only this amount of space. But his destiny ultimately overtakes him, and then he ends his life in righteous action and ends up in the place of the people of righteous action, which is the paradise. So, therefore, we never know what actually the person who is on salah and taqwa, So one needs to praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If people are praising Him, then so what? I don't know my ultimate, my ultimate destiny. I hope from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but I also have the fear of وَلَا يَأْمَنُ مَكْرَ اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْقَوْمُ الْخَاسِرُونَ. No one feels secure from the design of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except the people who are going to be losers. So that's the one thing. So on the one hand, if we have a standing because of a religious quality that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, then we revert that back to Allah, and that has nothing to do with us. That's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also we don't know where that's going to end. On the other hand, if people, and this is pretty much what people envy or hold people in position in the world today, because of the fact that they have wealth, they have things of the world. So this is not something to be to have standing in position in the first place. It's like having giving a position and standing, to the stalks of corn or the stalks of wheat, which very soon will turn into dry matter and then be scattered in the wind. So it doesn't have any intrinsic qualities that it really deserves to be held in esteem. So if one is being held, in esteem because of his wealth or his position, or his pedigree, or his, whatever, so then that's not even worthy of placing one in a position of standing and recognition in the first place. So one has to, kind of think about that. The ulama even mentioned it's kind of a novel thing that our pious ancestors, because they were so concerned about their position of iman and saving themselves from nifaq and saving themselves from the evils of jah. So they used to do certain things that would kind of, turn people off to think that, well, this guy is really not so great. It's said about Ibrahim al-Nakhi, he was a great faqih and a great muhaddith, that they were trying to get him to take the position of qadi. This was a very classic example of the former rulers. They would, it's still make this fellow my chief justice and keep him under my control, and he'll work for me. So obviously, and once the king puts his sights on you and he wants you, it's pretty difficult to resist. They'll force you, in fact. So anyway, so it's said about him that he put on a red cloth and sat in the market, in such a way that, and not, today no one would think anything like that, but wearing the color red is actually is a more feminine trait, and the people of standing and honor would not wear such things. Then they wouldn't hang out in the marketplaces. We of course, and there's other qualities, that today we're doing things that the previous people would have considered that what we call khalq al-marua. Their standing would totally drop. So they would do things like that just to divert the attention of the people, for the fear that the attention of the people is going to be to my detriment. Whereas we think that diverting the attention to us is going to be to our benefit, whereas they saw it was very detrimental. So I wouldn't say that we have to go to these extremes, but our pious ancestors, of course, they had a much more deep insight into their own affairs. In any case, but what we do have to do is we have to continuously look into ourselves and see our intentions and realize that if, as the hadith of Ibn Abbas says, that if the entire ummah, the entire creation all get together and they want to help us in an iota of good, they will never do so except that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants for us. And if the entire creation gathers together to harm us, they will not be able to do so except to the extent that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has destined. رُفِيَتِ الْأَقْلَامُ وَجُفَّتِ الصُّحُفِ. The pens of destiny have been risen, and the tablets of destiny, the ink has dried. So destiny is going to take its place. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq. This is a very delicate issue, and probably for most of you it's not that big of an issue. For people like us, it's a very big issue. So it's probably more for me and people like me than anyone else. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give me and all of us tawfiq to understand and follow the best of the guidance from Allah and His Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam.